you've started going to the gym, but you're a little bit aimless. You know the basics of lift heavy, you know how to do some exercises, but you really want something a little bit more structured. I've put together a little guide on some rules, if you will, on how to put together a really basic plan that will take you quite a long way. So I'll start at the end actually, and I'll start by explaining how to put it all together, and then once we've gone over that, I'll run through it all. I'll start with working on the program itself and planning that out, and then how you'll do each individual workout. So beginning with putting it all together, the first thing you want to do is decide on an overall program layout. So which days will have which muscle groups, when you can go in, what kind of a split will you do, and then are you resting enough in between workouts. Then you'll want to design each individual day. So you'll make sure you've selected sufficient compounds that hit each muscle group, isolations for individually targeting muscles as well. The order of these, which can get a little bit complicated, but also it doesn't really matter that much. And then how many sets per exercise, how many sets per muscle group, all of this stuff. Then right at the end, refining the program, fine-tuning it, making it exactly what you want it to be. So, planning the program. First of all, available time. This one's quite simple. You'll want to figure out how long you can go in for each day and how many days you can go in for in the week. This will be used to figure out what you'll do in the workout. So including warm-up, including rest, because yes, you've got the time to lift all these weights, but are you resting enough? Next up, there'll be the split. The split is quite simply how you are splitting up muscle groups into workouts. So are you doing all of your upper body in one workout and then your lower in another? Or are you doing a push workout, then a pull workout, and then a leg workout? Or are you doing a mix? Then of course it's important to have at least 48 hours between each workout where the same muscles are used. So if you're doing pull day on Monday, it would be a really bad idea to do arms on Tuesday because your biceps are used for pulling. That sort of stuff. Then there's the choice of exercise. There are so many different exercises. Some of them are bad, some of them are good. You can kind of say that there isn't a bad exercise, just the wrong exercise for the purpose that you want, which is true. So there's a few little things to consider. First of all, is the muscle being used that you want to target? Second of all, notice how the arm, muscle, leg moves and figure out if this is a good idea. So an example would be training chest with, I don't know what the exercise is called, but if you hold a plate out in front of yourself and you move it up and down and you're pushing in on your chest, it feels like your chest is activated and working, but your chest fibers run like that, sideways. It's for adduction of the arm. Adduction is coming together, abduction is going away. So this exercise is just going up and down. Well, it's working your front delt, not your chest. So that's something to bear in mind. Then of course, is there any discomfort or pain? If it hurts you, so for example, if you've got an acromion, which is a little bone in your shoulder that's hooked in a bad way, doing a bench press might impinge some tendons on it. So consider that. If you're hurting because of something, try a different exercise. And then lastly, and this is something you'll build up over time, mind-muscle connection. So for example, doing a normal bench press, I don't feel that much mind-muscle connection with my pecs. But if I'm doing a dumbbell bench press, then I find it a lot easier to feel that connection. So I'll use that instead. you want to think about this stuff for compounds and isolations. With isolations, it's a bit easier to figure out. So for example, there's an exercise where you, goodness, how do I show this up? Try like this, where you move you hold a dumbbell and you move your arm out to the side, and people sometimes think it's a bicep exercise, but you're not really doing anything with your bicep, you're just holding it in one place. So it's a lot easier to figure that out than in a compound. So isolations are a bit easier to pick than compounds, but the same logic applies. Now, how long will this program be good for? Quite a while, honestly. It can last between 6 and 12 months if you want, but I think that you'll learn a bunch in the first 3 months or so, and then you'll want to have a different program because you'll want to try different things. You'll want to maybe change the way you train, and that's completely fine. What I don't want you to do is switch it up every 2 weeks or so. The worst thing you can do to a program is stop it, change it, restart, and all of these things. Do it for a few months, see what happens, then do some big changes. Regarding overtraining, if your numbers are going down from week after week, you're probably overtraining if there isn't any way to explain it, like with fatigue or stress. There's a really good saying that my physio told me, which is stress is stress. So it doesn't matter if it's physical stress, emotional stress, stress from work, stress from deadlines, anything like this. If there's stress in your life, it will affect your lifting. So if you do find yourself overtrained, you can do a deload week. If you're a beginner, and even intermediates and advanced, I've seen this, it's very easy to overtrain in a deload week. Cut your effort to about 50%. You will be frustrated at how easy this week is, but it's a rest week. The only reason you're still going into the gym is to go through with the motions and to keep your mind and your muscles moving and used to those patterns. Now, within the workout, this is where there's a lot of confusion and where it's quite easy to do things rushed or even wrong. So we'll start with the most important thing, which is rest. For compound exercises, a minimum of 3 minutes will be best for muscle growth and strength adaptation. The less rest you have, the lower quality sets you'll have, the less you can lift. It's quite simple. For isolations, because it's just one muscle, it can recover a little bit faster, so I'd say you can get away with 2 minutes. Generally though, the more rest that you have, the better quality sets you'll have. So if you can't lift, let's say you can lift 50 kilos in a bench press without just, let's say with 2 minutes rest. But if you wait for 3 minutes, you can lift 65 kilos for a set of, 5, 10, whatever. You're putting your muscles under more strain, and the way that muscle growth is stimulated is by putting mechanical tension on the muscle. That's the specific way that it'll grow. Mechanical tension that goes almost close to failure. So the more mechanical tension you can put your muscles under, the more they'll grow. So if you're resting less and you can't put them under as much tension, they won't grow as much. Now, if you rest too much, your muscles will cool down. So there's two sides to this coin. How many sets? So this is a bit of a complicated one. I'll start by saying the higher intensity you use, the less sets you need. So let's say you go at, a 9 out of 10 intensity. You won't need as many sets as if you're going at a 6 out of 10 intensity. So for a beginner, I would say lower the intensity a bit and get used to get used to getting your form right and the mind-muscle connection before you try and blast away with a 9 out of 10 effort set or a 10 out of 10 effort set. So 3 sets at moderate intensity to high intensity is great. 2 sets you'll find is the best bang for your buck. So this is based on studies, by the way. And 1 set is enough. It's diminishing returns. So 1 set will do X amount of stimulus. 2 sets, you'll find a significant step up. 3 sets, less of a step up. And then after 3 sets, you'll find it really, really trails off. So you do not need 5 sets. You just don't need that. However, if you do a really, really low intensity, you need to make up for it. So it's a give and take game. How many exercises? Well, I find on a day that I'm training, let's say push, just 1 compound for the main muscles is enough. Maybe 2. If you do 1 isolation per targeted muscle, per muscle that you want to target, that's great, that's brilliant. But really, the sort of minimum buy-in, I'd say, is 1 compound for each thing. So if you want to do a push day, if you turned your push day into simply bench pressing, that would be sufficient. It won't be perfect, but you'll get 60, 70, 80% of the work done that you want to with that simple exercise. The isolations and maybe a secondary compound exercise are really covering the rest of it. So yeah, that covers that. How many reps per set? So officially 3 to 50, I'd say, is completely fine for building muscle, getting stronger. But when you go above about 20, it's not going to be your muscles giving in, it'll be endurance that'll be the limiting factor. And below kind of 5, 6, 7 reps or so, the intensity will be so high that your form will really kind of break down, especially if you don't have it nailed. So I don't think that's a good idea for a beginner to be working in sets of 5, sets of 4, sets of 3. So I think what would be wise is to keep it between 8 and 15. Get to know the form and do the exercise safely in a controlled fashion, rather than trying to put every single last drop of effort into pushing the weight up. The difference between high and low reps really is under 5, you're really specializing for strength, and you're not going to build much strength above 12 or so. In comparison, you will build strength at any rep range, and you will build muscle at any rep range, but this is about specificity. Don't worry about that though for now, just stick to 8 to 15 or so. Now, how hard should it be? For compounds, I would say 7 out of 10 or close to failure is completely fine. If you find your form breaking down, I would say stop at that point for now. For isolations, let's say bicep curls, go to failure if you want. I think that's completely fine. It's really not that hard to mess up the form, to get the form right, I should say. So go for it. When you become more experienced, what you can do is you can start purposefully having poor form towards the end. So let's say you're doing bicep curls, rather than doing a perfectly strict movement, you can then huck the weight up and then slowly let it down, because you're stronger on the eccentric, which is the down portion, rather than the concentric, which is the up portion. So you can get more mechanical tension by having a slow eccentric and then cheating the weight up. Now, stretching and warming up. What's up with that? You see people stretching, warming up. What should you do? Don't stretch before you work out a muscle. It will not protect you from injury. but it will make you weaker, and it might even injure you. What you want to do is warm up. There are two things you want to achieve with warming up. The first one is literally warming up your muscle, getting the blood flow going, and you want to get the joints moving as well. That's the first thing you want to achieve. This can be achieved with lots of reps. So you could have a negligible weight and just do it a whole bunch of times. That would warm that up. The second part of warming up is you want to prime your nervous system, your central nervous system, your mind and the muscle for lifting heavy weights. This is where doing sets at certain weights and pyramiding up a little bit is important. But careful, don't overdo it. If you overdo it, you'll tire yourself out a bit, and your working sets, which are the sets where you're trying to put yourself under true mechanical tension close to failure, won't be as efficacious. So I've written out here with a little typo how to do that. Once you've already done, let's say, a compound movement at the start of your workout, and you do an isolation using one of those muscles right afterwards, you're already warmed up in terms of the blood flowing and your joints being ready for the exercise. What you're not ready for in that moment will be the amount of weight loaded onto that muscle. So it might be worth doing a couple of sets that get the muscle acclimatized to that weight in that specific movement pattern. Now, compounds or isolations first. It doesn't matter. There are reasons to do either, but at this stage it really doesn't matter. Do what you prefer. I would recommend that you would do some isolations first. So what I'll do is if I'm doing squats, I'll do leg extension first to tire out my quads, and maybe some leg curls even. So that then when I do the squats, the limiting factor will be my legs rather than my core. You'll find you can leg press a lot more than you can squat. And this is because there is no stability required in the leg press. So it's just purely your leg muscles doing the work. In a squat, you have to balance a bar on your back using your core. So pre-exhausting your muscles in your legs before you do the squat will mean that you get your legs themselves closer to failure in the squat. However, the flip side of it is, if you would rather do all the difficult hard work first and see slightly higher numbers in the compounds, do the compounds first. This is more of a powerlifter approach. So for bodybuilding, do the compounds last, I would recommend. But like I said, this is a tiny little distinction that really doesn't matter, and you can feel free to try both. Regarding form, we've already touched on this, so I'll keep it very short and sweet. Form should be very important to you, especially at this beginner stage. What you learn now is going to determine essentially how you're going to behave when you really go to the heavyweights. So if you learn poor form right now, even if you go and try and switch over mentally to a better form when you're doing, let's say, a 5-rep max, you'll default to the bad form that you learned early on. So get this right now and you'll have plain sailing later on. Now, to put it all together, we already went over this. What I thought we would do is do a little plan. So I'll walk through. I've already written it out. It took about 5 minutes, so this is really nothing special, but it's just an example of the thought process of how I'm going about it and what my choices are, why I've made them. So I'll run you through that, and then you can just go and do your own or copy it. I don't mind. Start recording here. Right. I've started with no split preference. I don't mind. if I wanted to do push-pull legs, I could go and work that in. It's kind of based off of that. I've got 1.5 to 2 hours a day available for 5 days in the week. So the first thing I did was I drew out a chart. You can do this in Word, Excel, on a piece of paper, it really doesn't matter. And I put out the days of the week, and then I started with legs. I personally like to start with legs because if I do, let's say, a pull day before my leg day, that uses a bit of my lower back. And I find if my lower back is a little bit tired, that limits me in squats. So I'd rather do that first and then a pull day. So that's just my personal kind of opinion for that. What I prefer. So legs, then a pull day, then a push day, then a pull day, then a push day. Quite simple. I go really hard on my legs, so I only train it once a week or so in this setup. In the ideal world, I'd do it twice a week, but here we've only got 5 days a week, so that's fine. So let's look at what we're doing to cover all of legs. Starting off with leg extensions, as squatting is a bit more quad dominant, so I want to tire them out first. Then going straight into squats, so the energy is still high, still got a lot of effort. And 2 sets, 3 sets, that's fine. Right there, that's 5 sets of quads. And that's pretty much all you need if you're going really hard in a week. Then calves. You can put the calves at the end, wherever you want. You can put them before the squats even. It doesn't matter. Then lastly, GHD, which is glute ham developer. Essentially, it's a hamstring and glute exercise right before RDLs. Because with RDLs, you have to, Romanian deadlifts, you have to hold a lot of weight out in front of you. It's kind of in front of your core, I should say. So that's the limiting factor. So I want to exhaust my glutes and my hamstrings first so that I get the most out of them in that exercise. Now, for the pull and push day, you might notice I wrote 1 and 2. You don't have to do this, but what I'll like to do is if I'm doing 2 push days and 2 pull days in a week, I might focus one push day on stuff that's in front of me, and then another one on stuff that's above. For the pull day, what you'll notice is one is pronated and one is supinated. So pronation is when your hands are like this. Supination is when they're like this. So you'll notice, I'll do the pull days first and then the push days. You'll notice from exercise choice, pull day, we start off with lat pull downs. Get the lats working, get the biceps on fire, all of this stuff. I mean, you could just do pull-ups in your pull day and that would do quite a lot. So we start with lat pull downs. Then we go into seated rows. So that's your bicep is kind of, it's not in the shortest position, it's a little bit longer. And most importantly, your hand is in a neutral position. It's not really pronated, but it's more neutral. It's more like the bicep will behave in a pronated way. So that's why we've got that. Then hammer curls, which are really good for an underrated muscle, which is the brachialis. It's under the biceps. So that'll work that really well. Then finally, rear delt flies. Or you could do face pulls. It's really up to you. And then finally shrugs. You can do the shrugs before that. Really doesn't matter. That's to hit the traps, of course. And the rear delts are the criminally undertrained, so that's quite important. Now supinated. Lat pull down, supinated. So rather than pulling it down like this, we're pulling it down like this, and the grip will be a little bit closer for that. You're hitting the same muscles in the back, but your biceps in a different position. Then seated cable rows, supinated. So rather than going on the seated row machine to do your seated rows, you might want to go on a cable machine and then hold a bar like this and pull it in towards you. Then bicep curls, you can do them strict, you can do them against a bench that's been put on incline, whatever you want. Rear delt flies, shrugs. Now for the push in front, pec deck to wear out the chest, then dumbbell bench, my preference. You don't have to. The reason we're doing this is because the pecs are a lot stronger than your triceps, so the triceps become the limiting factor in a bench press. That's why I pre-exhaust my pecs, so that I'm actually bringing my pecs closer to failure in the bench press. Then incline bench, only 2 sets. You don't need to go silly. We've already trained chest in this direction. You've got the pectoral head and the clavicular head, 2 different parts of your chest. So they're both being hit in both exercises, one preferentially. Then finally tricep extensions and lateral delt raises for the sides there. Lastly, for the above, we'll start with overhead press. It's quite a difficult exercise, requires a lot of technique, so put that first so that you're full of energy when you do it. Then pec deck to wear out the chest, because now your triceps have been worked in the first exercise, so they're a little bit worn out. So pec deck, then dumbbell bench, then tricep extensions and lateral delt raises. In terms of the number of sets I've given to these, a lot of it depends on my personal experience and what I felt is all right for the amount of energy that I have, for how much effort I can put into these sets. And now we go and talk about refining the program. So you'll run this program for a week or so. If you don't like a certain exercise, switch it out for another one that does exactly the same thing, but maybe a little bit differently. If you don't like the pec deck, put in cable crossovers. It's exactly the same. I know a friend of mine, he hates the pec deck, loves crossovers. I don't like crossovers, but I love the pec deck. And I found a very specific way that I do pec deck myself. I'll stand up in it so that my arms are facing down a little bit, so that I don't get a shoulder impingement. So you can modify these things as you go and make these decisions for yourself. What I actually did include right at the end here, goodness. If you've only got one, because I figured if you want like a full body split, if you've only got one day, what in my opinion is the must-have sort of exercises? You could only have one day of working out. So I decided squats, RDLs, bench, overhead press, a pull down motion, a vertical pull motion and a horizontal pull motion. The muscles that are neglected in this would really be calves and lateral delts, but that will get you 95% bang for your buck if you can only go in, let's say, twice a week and you want to go through a circuit of everything. I would do that. When it comes to designing your own split, maybe the volume is too much to begin with, maybe it's too little. If you find doing 6 sets of chest pressing exercises is too much, maybe do 2 of each, or maybe just do 3 of one. Figure these things out in the first week or so, adjust them in the second week, see how it goes, and if you like it, keep it. But once you've decided on something, stick with it and run with it. And of course, within your workouts, you need to bear these things in mind. So form, rest, and how hard you're going. Those are the 3 things you should bear in mind during each workout. But the rest will be sorted out essentially by this plan. So by now you should be able to go through this workflow process and make your own program for, as a beginner. Good luck.